Hey, it's Art from my new microphone. In this video, let's discuss sidechain compression, what it is, and how we can use it in our music production and mixes. Sidechain compression is a compression style or technique where we take an external signal to control a compressor that is acting upon another signal. Technically speaking, every compressor has a sidechain signal path, and that sidechain signal is effectively turned into a control voltage that controls the gain reduction circuit of that compressor. Now, typically, the sidechain signal will be taken from the input signal, either before or after the gain reduction circuit, depending on the type of compressor design. However, the sidechain compression technique utilizes an external audio signal to control the gain reduction circuit, rather than having the compressor use the input signal to control that gain reduction circuit. So normally a compressor will act to reduce the level of an input signal as that input signal surpasses a set threshold according to the sidechain and the compressor settings. However, with sidechain compression, the compressor will act to attenuate the input signal depending on whether or not the external sidechain signal surpasses a set threshold or not. The rest of the compressor parameters will remain the same. It's just that the compressor will be reacting to an external audio signal rather than the typical input signal. Sidechain compression is an invaluable tool to have as a mixing engineer or a music producer and can be used in many different instances throughout a variety of different mixing styles. It can be used to help the most important element be upfront compared to the other elements in terms of frequency masking. It can help separate the kick and bass. It can be used for EDM pumping. It can be used to add extra rhythm to rhythmic tracks or MIDI tracks that are a bit lacking in terms of rhythmic excitement, and much, much more. With that, let's hop into Logic Pro, and I will demo a few of these common use cases for sidechain compression in music production and mixing. Let's go. All right, here we are inside of Logic Pro, and I'd like to discuss the first instance in this video of using sidechain compression, and that is to allow the most important element in the mix to be upfront while ducking the less important elements in the mix while still allowing both of them to be heard. So in this instance, we have a lead vocal as well as horns. So we have a trumpet, a trombone, and a saxophone right here. You can see the sax, trombone, and trumpet, as well as a general horns mic that was a little bit further away. And we have our lead and background vocals right here. Now, in the chorus of this song, we can have a quick listen.
Why do you take me in and then leave me on the ground?
Now, while you can hear the lead vocal pretty clearly, the horns and the vocal are somewhat competitive in that mid-range. So what I did here was I went to the horns bus. We can see here that all of these horns are being bused to bus 4, and then this bus is coming in right here on the horns bus. So input bus 4, horns bus. So all of the horns are going through this horns bus, and on this horns bus, I have a compressor right here. This is just the stock Logic compressor in digital platinum mode. And we see here in the sidechain, I have this keyed to the lead vocal right here. So whenever the lead vocal is present, it will duck the entirety of the horn section. So if we play this back now, we will see the compressor in action.
Why do you take me in and then leave me on the ground? Surrounded by the weight of your words and the sounds you make when you're lying inside of me. Feels so right, why can't?
So it's very subtle, but you can hear that the vocal is just a little bit more present and the horns are a little bit back away from the vocal, allowing the vocal to take the center stage of the mix. So you can see here in the compressor, I'm only reducing the gain by about 2 or 3 dB. And when the vocal is not present, those horns can swell in and take up that space that they normally would have. So in this use case, we are using sidechain compression to allow the more important element, the vocal, to take the center stage while pushing the less important element, being the horns, a little bit back. All right, the second sidechain compression use case I have for you is to separate the kick and the bass a little bit in the mix. So right here, we have one of my tracks. It's a very dense mix. We can have a quick listen here. So you can hear that there's a lot going on in this mix. And so I wanted to get as much separation as I could because there's so much going on. And so one way of getting that extra separation, particularly in the low end, is to use sidechain compression to duck the bass whenever the kick drum is present, and then to have the bass fully present when the kick drum is not sounding. So the way to do this is I have my bass bus right here. You could also do this on a bass track, and I have a compressor right here. Again, we are using Logic's stock compressor in digital platinum mode. I'll drag that up there. And we see that the sidechain key right here is kick in. If we scroll over, we see kick in right here. So whenever this kick drum is sounding, we will be ducking the bass. Let's have a listen. So you'll notice that using sidechain compression in this mix is pretty subtle, but it allows that kick drum to punch through a little bit more without overly affecting the overall loudness of the bass. Let me demo this for you one more time. We'll start with the compressor off, and then I will toggle it on and off as we listen. So again, it is very subtle, but mixing is often a game of inches, and we're using just little subtle techniques here to help give a little bit more separation to the low end between the kick and the bass. If you want to learn more about mixing kick and bass, I have a video on that subject. I'll leave a link to that in the description box down below. All right, the next sidechain compression use case I have for you is a little bit more involved. It's what I deem dynamic reverb or dynamic delay. And what we have in this instance is a track that is feeding an effects return that is affected with either delay or reverb. And then that delay or reverb effects return has a compressor that is keyed to the original source. So whenever the original source is present, the delay or reverb effect will be brought down in level. And then as that original source is not present, the reverb or delay will be able to swell up in volume. So this is particularly useful with time-based effects as they linger on as the original source stops. And I find it particularly useful in vocals. So in this session, Blunt Cousin, The Unending Maze, I have my vocal right here that is being sent to buses 23 and 24. And then if we look at these buses, we have our first delay, the input is 23, and this other delay, the input is 24. So in this case, I have two effects returns, but you really only need one. I only set up two in this case so that I could have a whole note delay on this one and a half note delay on this one. So both of these are being affected by the same style of compressor. Once again, it's the stock one from Logic in Platinum Digital mode. And we see here that the sidechain is keyed to Art Sing, which is the same track that is feeding both of these effects returns. So you see that both of them are set up with Art Sing as the keyed sidechain input. So let's have a quick listen here. I'll only show one of these compressors for real estate purposes so that you can see how much gain reduction is happening.
The gods for a minute. Ask them what are the odds that they've written. A coincidental collision.
So you can see there that there's about 10 dB of gain reduction happening, and the release is very slow. We're at 3 seconds right here, so that the delay effect is significantly ducked while the dry vocal is present. And then you hear between the phrases there on the vocal, the delay kind of swells in and fills up that space. We can do the same thing with reverb. I can show you that quickly here as well. If we turn off the tape delay and turn on the chromaverb, this is the stock algorithmic reverb that comes with Logic. In this case, I just have the chamber set up on both of these. And let's have a listen to what this sounds like while looking at this compressor right here. That helps give us a sense of space without washing out the vocal. If I was to take these compressors off and have a listen back, we can hear that the reverb is likely going to wash these out quite significantly. So you heard how washed out the vocal got there when the compressor wasn't ducking the reverb effect, but you also heard how much of a spatial effect that reverb gave as it swelled in between the vocal lines right here. If I was to mute both of these and have a listen back, we could hear the difference in how dry this vocal would sound in the context of the mix. So this is without any delay and without any reverb.
Break bread with the gods for a minute. Ask them what are the odds that they've written.
So it almost sounds uncanny and very much upfront in the mix and separated from the rest of the elements. So using sidechain compression in this case to have a dynamic reverb or dynamic delay effect can really help give that space without washing out the mix. I actually have a video on this topic that I will leave a link in the description box if you'd like to check out dynamic delay and reverb in greater detail. Also, if you're finding this video useful thus far, I would encourage you to hit that like button. It really helps get this video out to more people. I appreciate that. All right, the fourth sidechain compression use case I have for you today is to add a little bit of rhythm or groove to our tracks within the mix. So in this case, I have one of my songs, To the Moon and Back, and in the second part of this song, I have this hi-hat right here that is being sidechain compressed against the kick drum in this case, and the snare drum in this case. So the kick in and the snare top of the drum kit are being used to reduce the gain of the hi-hats in order to give it a little bit more rhythm. Now, to hear this in the most obvious way, what I'll do is I will just solo this track right here, and we can have a listen to that. So it may sound a little bit odd by itself, but this extra groove in the greater context of the mix, especially when we have the overheads that are capturing the hi-hats as well, can really play a role in how we feel the rhythm of the track. So now that we aren't soloing the hi-hat, let's listen to this in the greater context of the mix, and I'll toggle these compressors on and off. So this is a subtle technique, but mixing is a game of inches, and it just helps us feel that extra bit of rhythm without really hearing it all that much. It's unlikely that somebody would hear this sidechain compression and know exactly what I'm doing. However, we can feel it as a sense of greater groove in the context of the entire mix. All right, and as a final use case for sidechain compression, I would be remiss to not mention the classic EDM pumping effect that typically happens when the kick drum is keyed to many other elements in the mix so that the kick can punch through the mix and all the elements will duck down to allow that to happen. Now, to demo this, I have somewhat of a blast from the past. I haven't produced EDM in quite some time, but this is the song One by an old project of mine called Sinusoidal. Let's have a quick listen to what this sounds like. So the first thing that jumps out to me is the sub bass right here. And if we look at the compressor of this channel right here, we see that we actually have two. They are both Logic's stock compressor. The first is in the typical Platinum Digital setting, and the second is in the Vintage Opto, which effectively emulates the Teletronic LA2A compressor. So let's have a look at what these are doing in the context of the mix. So you can see that they are both giving me about -5 dB, so 5 dB of gain reduction, so a total of about 10 dB of gain reduction each. And that allows the kick to punch through, particularly in the low end, because both of these elements are taking up valuable low end frequency space in the mix. You may have noticed as well that the Platinum Digital is much more smooth. It goes in and out, whereas the Opto right here dances around a little bit more to give a little bit of extra rhythm. I'll play this back one more time for you. And I really enjoy using serial compression when I'm going for a more aggressive sidechain compression effect. This allows me to get a few different flavors of compression. You can see here, again, I'm using the Platinum Digital along with the Vintage Opto. But also if I'm going really hard to sidechain compress something and I really want to duck it, then serial compression can help, especially in terms of the time controls. So for example, if I was to bypass this compressor and try to get 10 dB with just the Platinum Digital, this is what that would sound like. So you can see there that, yes, I'm getting the negative 10 dB of gain reduction, but the needle never makes it back to 0. So it goes to negative 10 and then it comes back to negative 5. So really this is as if I'm only getting 5 dB of pumping and I just turned down the overall channel by 5 dB. So if I play this one more time, you can see that. So the pumping effect is only going between negative 10 and negative 5. So I'm getting 5 dB of reduction there. Whereas when I had both of these going at the same time, I was getting 5 dB of gain reduction plus 5 dB of gain reduction as both these needles were hitting 0 between the next kick. So let's return this to what it was. And let's have a listen now to what this sounds like with and without the compressors. So it's almost as if it gives more attention to the kick and the bass. Not only does the kick get to punch through as the bass is ducked, but also it gives the bass a bit more of a rhythmic feel within the context of the mix. But this doesn't only have to be about the kick and the bass. It can also be about the kick and many other elements. If we go over here, we can see that the kick drum is also affecting this riff right here, along with this string pad right here. So if we were to play this back now, we can see these two compressors dancing around. And if we solo these, we can really hear what's going on. So let's solo my voice first, and then come back here and solo the pad, as well as this riff right here. So that helps give a little bit more rhythm to the track while allowing that all-important kick drum to press through, which is typically the most important element in electronic dance music. So even though I'm not 100% happy with this mix, again, this was several years ago, I wanted to use this project to kind of show the EDM pumping effect and how we can use it in our mixes. And before we go, I want to show you another neat technique that we can use. Let's say that the kick drum was not giving us that exact gain reduction pumping that we wanted. We could actually use what is called a ghost sidechain. So if this kick was no good and this kick was no good, we could take something like the snare, for example, create a new track right here, set this up as our ghost sidechain signal. Let's drag this to the top. And then we could take something like a snare or something a little bit more snappy than a kick drum to give us a better sidechain signal for our compressors to react to. And I would just go here and bring this typically to copy the exact rhythm of the kick, which is often 4 to the floor. We can just copy this quickly like this, just for the looped section right here. And what I will do with this ghost sidechain is I will have no output. So this is not being outputted. Let me turn this input 1 off. So there's no input, no output. This is not being sent to the stereo out whatsoever. If we were to listen back, we wouldn't be able to hear this. But you can see that there's still audio being sent through this channel. And what we can do then is we can go to our sidechain compressors here. We'll use the bass as our example, and we can key this now to the ghost sidechain right here. Let's do the same thing for this one. And so now these compressors are being sidechain compressed against this ghost sidechain right here. So let's have a look and listen to this. So that's just a way of giving us a bit more control over the sidechain if we would like to go that route. In many cases, the kick drum will be perfectly sufficient in terms of EDM. However, I wanted to give you that example as well of using a ghost sidechain. And with this too, we could have it control, even though there's no bass right here. In theory, we could have it trigger right here when there's no kick drum, or even between kick drums like this, or to produce any other rhythm that may be different from the kick drum that we would want in the mix. Now, if you want to forego using sidechain compression, which I often do, it can be a little bit tedious to set up. There is a third-party tool I really like using from Xfer Records called LFO tool. We can open this up, and it's basically just a volume modulator where you can control volume over time. We have a rate here, and this is just a repeating volume control right here. So if we are to solo this pad, for instance, we can have a listen to the LFO tool versus the sidechain compression so that we can compare the two. So this plugin right here, the Xfer Records LFO tool, can give us a very similar effect without all of the work that goes into setting up and keying a compressor for sidechain compression. We also have much more control over the exact volume envelope that we may want to produce. So this is a third-party tool. I'll leave a link to it in the description box down below. I figured I would mention it here as it can really produce the same results that we would want to get with sidechain compression, only much faster within the context of the mix. If you want to learn more about mixing in a practical way, I put together a free mixing guidebook that you can check out by hitting that first link in the description box below. Sign up to my newsletter and I will send that to you right away. It goes through the workflow of a mixing engineer and shows you the step-by-step process to help you make the right decisions at the right times in your mixes to make them sound better and more consistent across all of your mixes. If you want to hear more from me here at the My New Microphone YouTube channel, I would invite you to hit that subscribe button and to also check out another few videos here on the YouTube channel. I'll leave them in the top right and left corner. So click on one of those and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.